Please welcome Mr. Eric Gertler.
Thank you, Andrew. I always love coming to Miami, but now that I have this passport to all these great restaurants, I'm coming here more often, so thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here to talk about how cities can become more people-centric, and I will talk about how workforce development plays into that equation. Now, I can feel the passion here about cities. I love cities too, and I love cities because they've always been the central gathering place for ideas and movements from the beginning of history. So if you think about our country, the beginnings of independence were brewed at a certain tea party in Boston. Our Constitution took place in Philadelphia, and the seeds of economic and financial power were sowed on the streets of New York City. And this is no different than in other places around the world. So the great Renaissance thinkers assembled in Florence, and the Industrial Revolution was sparked in Birmingham, England. Now, you know this, people love to live in cities. And this trend is simply growing to the point where by 2050, two-thirds of the world will be living in cities, and that's compared to a third in 1950. And people come to cities, and you've talked about it on these previous panels, to collaborate with each other. And certainly about design, people come together on design, but also in a world where we have all of these interconnected technologies, knowledge-based businesses, people want to collaborate together, and even in cities, they want to be so close that they want to work in these shared workspaces like WeWork. The issue now that we've got to think about is the fourth industrial revolution is about to begin. And by that I mean mobile technology, automated learning, artificial intelligence. All of this is going to change the way we work, the way we live. And in fact, it will affect every industry, every blue-collar and every white-collar job. And we know that cities do well when people do well, and we've got to make sure that the jobs are there for people and the opportunities are there so that people can prosper for themselves and, of course, for their families. Think about this as well. In the next 4 years around the world, we're going to see 75 million jobs disappear and be replaced by 135 million new and different jobs. Now, this may mean that we need to think about more macroeconomic changes, but we need to start with thinking about how do we develop people's skills and how do we build skills at scale. And so right now, as we look at the economy, there are all these misalignments between jobs and skills, and because this misalignment has existed for so long, there's no one solution. But I thought what I would do is offer 5 ideas for this conference. And I know in the last panel, one of the panelists talked about data. And I think, first of all, we can use data to close the gap. So I would offer that we need to create both a national repository and also local databases that list all of the jobs that are available for job seekers, but not just the jobs, also the skills that you need for those jobs. You see, we've published some of the economic statistics, and we've seen rosy economic data about jobs. But the reality is that our economy confronts an unusual misalignment. Today, there are more job vacancies, 7.5 million, than people unemployed, 5.8 million. And so we need cities and states to work with industry to be able to identify those jobs and those skills so that we can put more people to work. And this is an opportunity, by the way, to include in the workforce people who are disabled, people that have not typically had access to jobs, people coming out of prisons, for example. So we need to use data to open that up. Secondly, we also need to think about pathways that go beyond just the four-year college education track. So a college education is invaluable to many, but it may no longer be imperative for others. So today, just to give you a few statistics, 40% of college graduates work in jobs where they actually don't even need that degree. Today, some of the lowest paid college grads are paid less than the high school grads who are getting paid the most money. So there's another misalignment there. And we also know that those that graduate from college today, unfortunately, graduate with huge student debt. 45 million Americans have, on average, $30,000 in debt. And when people go to college, only 60% graduate after 6 years. So that means we've got a third of students who want to graduate or looking to graduate and never graduate. And so when you look at these pay differences and these graduation rates, it means that we need to start thinking about vocational education and lifelong learning. And right now, as a country, the United States spends the least amount of money on vocational training than any OECD country. And I think it's imperative that we start to rethink how we train people for the future. I also think that private industry must take on a more hands-on approach in training workers. Let me give you another statistic. Next year, our workforce will need 1.4 million people with computer science degrees. But our colleges will only graduate 400,000 people with those degrees. So we're seeing companies taking matters into their own hands, but we need more companies to do that. So, for example, Lockheed Martin last year hired 14,000 people. 7,000 did not have college degrees. So instead, what did they do? They looked for individuals that had basic skills, and then they trained those people in labs that they had created in partnership with universities. And then these individuals had gained the necessary skills, often in advanced manufacturing. They could take on those jobs and then had good salaries. We also need to think about lifelong learning. And companies are also creating programs in lifelong learning. So one company, Infosys, has learned that if they provide their employees with programs of 8 to 12 weeks, they can prepare their workers for the jobs of the future. And they have created programs in cybersecurity and data analytics, again, partnering with universities to make sure that we have and their employees have the skills that they need for the future. And by the way, in this category, I would also include apprenticeships and mentorships, which the data now shows you get an almost immediate return on these programs. But I would make sure, and those of you that hire interns, make sure not just to hire interns and those for apprenticeships, but go outside your networks. Look to hire, and these companies should be hiring individuals that are not in their networks, individuals who are underrepresented, people of color, who don't necessarily have access to those jobs, because we need to bring, the diversity into these companies, and too often, companies rely on the networks of their executives. The fourth thing is we need to focus our efforts now on demand-driven hiring as opposed to supply-driven. What I mean is that we need to understand what companies actually need as opposed to educating students for sort of generic jobs. And this means that we need to work hard to bring universities together with industry, together with government. And those partnerships are critical. I'll give you one example. In the DC area, you have the CEOs of industry actually meeting with university presidents to design a curriculum so that students are developing the skills that these companies need, But then they go one step further. They then give those students that complete those programs a preference in their hiring. So you really need now to, at a local level, work together and collaborate on these programs. And then lastly, we need to continue to invest in innovation at the city level. And that means creating and investing in ecosystems of innovation and entrepreneurship that are self-perpetuating, that create value and opportunity for the entire community, and opportunities that everybody can participate. So, to give you an example from my experience in government, after the Great Recession in 2009, Mayor Bloomberg challenged the economic development team to think of ways in which we could diversify the economy so that New York City wasn't as dependent on the financial sector, which we know was certainly one of the industries that was hurt during that recession. Not that all industries were not ultimately hurt. And so what that led to, it led to a brainstorming session between the economic development team and leaders in the city. And not just leaders in industry, it was nonprofit leaders, it was academic leaders, it was leaders in design, leaders in real estate. And what concluded was an idea that we needed to undertake an applied science initiative that would transform the city. And the result was the creation of what is now known as Cornell Tech. It was a partnership between Cornell and Technion that was built on Roosevelt Island in New York City, and that opened in September of 2017. When we did the estimates for this project, we estimated that about 8,000 jobs would be created, that there would be hundreds of startup companies that would be spun out of this university, and that over a 30-year period, there would be approximately $30 billion in economic development. And the great thing, 2 years into it, we are already seeing the benefits of creating a leading academic institution in the applied sciences in a major city. Also, for me, one of my major mandates was to think about and attract great talent, top-notch talent to New York City. And it was Mayor Bloomberg's view that talent always attracts money and not the other way around. And so we invested in people. We invested in recruiting people from other cities to come to New York. We made sure that we allowed all of New York to take advantage of the opportunities that New York had to offer. And what happened? New York City became the leading leading urban recipient of venture capital money after Silicon Valley. And that's what happens. We talk about people-centric, and that's what happens when you invest in your people. So I just want to end by saying that people have always been, are today, and will continue to be the foundation of any city. And when I think of the term smart cities, I think about it being smart because of the people. It's the people first. And if we want to ensure that our cities of the future are strong and vibrant, we need to begin by investing in people and also investing in workforce of tomorrow. Thank you so much.